The abandoned ones, the battlefield was silent now, silent in a way that felt heavy, as if the ground itself remembered the screams from only a few hours ago. Broken machines lay twisted like dead animals, their wires sparking weakly in the cold. Wind, the air smelled of ash and metal, mixed with the faint scent of burning oil. Among this wreckage, a shadow moved slowly, too big to be a human, too graceful to be a machine. It was the alien dragon, her wings torn, her scales dim with blood and dust. She had been a terror during the war, a weapon feared by all, yet now she looked nothing like a weapon. Her chest rose and fell slowly, weakly, as if every breath was a fight she was losing. Beside her, hidden under the broken curve of her wing, was a much smaller creature, her baby. The baby dragon pressed against her mother's side, its small eyes wide with fear, its tiny chest shaking with every whimper. High above the valley, alien commanders stood on a broken ridge, their armor glowing faintly under the dim sun. They spoke in harsh voices, their words carrying down to the ruins below. "She is no longer useful," one said coldly. "Her wounds are too deep, she will not survive. Her hatchling is even weaker." Another added, "Leave them, resources must not be wasted." With that, the commanders turned away, their soldiers following, leaving the mother and child to die alone. But one pair of eyes stayed behind. Jaron, the human mechanic, crouched near a broken war machine, pretending to check its circuits. His tools clinked softly as he worked, but his mind was not on the machine. He had heard the orders, he had seen the dragon left to die, and something about it gnawed at him. The dragon's great golden eye had opened just once and looked at him, not with rage, not with fire, but with pain. A mother's pain, and Jaron could not shake that look from his mind. He kept working on the broken panel in front of him, but his hands trembled. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He was just a mechanic, not a soldier, not a hero. Humans were not even supposed to be here. They were servants in this war, fixing what broke, cleaning what others destroyed. Yet, his heart pounded every time he heard the baby dragon's cry, a sound so soft yet so sharp it cut through him like a blade. As the sun began to sink, the valley grew colder. The baby cried again, its little voice echoing in the empty battlefield. The sound made Jaron's chest tighten. He looked around, no commanders in sight, no soldiers watching, just him, the broken machines, and the dying dragons. He took a shaky breath. "If I walk away now," he whispered under his breath, "I'm no better than them." His boots crunched softly on the rubble as he moved closer, step by step. The mother dragon lifted her head slightly, her jaw opening as if she might strike, but her strength failed her, and her head dropped back to the ground with a heavy thud. The baby peeked out at him, its eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. It let out a small cry, not fierce, not threatening, but pleading. Jaron froze, his pulse racing. He could still turn back. He could pretend he never heard it, never saw it. But his feet kept moving forward, as if his body had already made the choice his mind was too afraid to say out loud. He stopped only when he stood at the edge of the dragon's wing. Up close, she was massive, her scales rough like stone, her breath hot but shallow. The baby pressed against her side, shivering, its scales pale with weakness. Jaron slowly knelt, his hand brushing over the broken metal box he carried. Inside were scraps of food, leftover emergency rations, and a few tools. He knew it was not enough to heal them, not even close, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. He placed the box gently on the ground. Sliding it closer, the baby sniffed at it, confused, then looked up at him with wide eyes. For a long moment, nothing moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the baby leaned forward, touching the box with its nose. A soft sound escaped it, almost like a sigh, and Jaron felt a strange warmth rise in his chest. The mother dragon's eye opened again, dim but watchful, her gaze locked on Jaron. And for the second time that day, he saw no hatred, no fire, only pain, only trust so fragile it could break at any moment. Jaron swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I don't know why I'm doing this," he whispered, "but I can't leave." "You like this?" The valley wind howled around them, carrying away the last sounds of the retreating soldiers. Night was coming, and with it, danger. But Jaron no longer cared about orders or fear of death. He cared only about the wounded dragon and her helpless child, and in that moment, as the shadows of night crept closer, the mechanic broke the first rule of survival. He chose compassion, and somewhere in the darkness, fate shifted, waiting to see where this dangerous choice would lead. The silent cry. The night had fully fallen over the valley, wrapping the broken land in darkness. The ruins of machines glowed faintly with dying sparks, like fireflies trapped in twisted metal cold. Air swept through the battlefield, sharp and bitter, carrying with it the silence of death. But in that silence, a sound rose. Soft at first, then sharper, echoing through the wreckage. It was the baby dragon's cry. A cry that did not sound like a roar, but like a wounded bird lost in the night. The sound carried far, piercing Jaron's heart each time it came. He sat behind a broken piece of steel, his back pressed against the cold surface, his hands clutching his tool bag. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing. He had broken the rules, he had offered food. He had stood close enough to touch the dragon's scales. And now the baby cried out again, louder, desperate. The sound was too much. It was not just noise, it was a plea, a call for help that no soldier would ever answer. Jaron shut his eyes, covering his ears, but the cry still lived inside his chest. Every note of it reminded him of things he had tried to forget. The faces of people he couldn't save during past battles, the helpless children left behind in burned towns. The way the commanders always said, "Leave them," when someone was no longer useful. That was what made him different. What made his heart ache now. He remembered, and remembering hurt. The baby cried again, and this time the mother shifted. Her broken body trembled as she tried to move her wing closer around the hatchling. But her strength failed her, and her wing fell limp, leaving the little one exposed to the cold wind. Jaron saw the baby press harder against her side, shivering. His throat tightened, his fists clenched. He whispered to himself, his voice hoarse, "If I walk away now, I will hear that sound for the rest of my life." The baby's cry was not just sound anymore. It was a chain pulling him forward. He rose to his feet, his knees shaking, his boots crunching softly on broken glass and dust. The valley seemed alive now, every sound louder, every shadow darker. If a patrol came, if the commanders returned, he would be caught. He would be executed without trial. But still he walked toward the dragons. Step by step, the baby saw him again, its small head turning, eyes glowing faintly like embers. It made a softer sound now, less of a cry, more of a whimper, almost questioning. Jaron knelt near the fallen supply box he had left earlier. Inside were scraps, dried protein packs, a little water, not much but more than nothing. He took one pack, broke it open, and set it on a flat piece of metal before sliding it closer. The baby sniffed at it, curious, then looked back at him, hesitant. The mother dragon opened her eye, weak but aware, her gaze locked onto Jaron again, heavy and sharp. Jaron froze. His chest tight, one wrong move and she could still lash out, even half dead. But instead of anger, her gaze softened, as if she understood why he was here. Her eye closed slowly, her head sinking back into the dust, as if granting permission. The baby stepped forward, sniffed again, then took a tiny bite. The sound it made while chewing was small, almost gentle. But to Jaron, it was the loudest sound in the world, because it meant he had kept it alive for one more moment. He sat there, watching, his body tense. The cry had turned into small noises now, soft huffs between bites. The baby's trembling slowed, its little chest rising more steadily. Jaron exhaled, leaning back against the broken steel. For the first time that night, he felt a spark of relief. But that relief did not last. Far in the distance, lights moved, patrol drones scanning the Ruins, their red beams cut through the darkness like knives, sweeping across the valley. Jaren cursed it under his breath, pulling his bag close. If the drones scanned this spot, they would see the heat signatures, his, the baby's, even the mother's fading warmth. And then everything would be over. He looked at the dragons then. At the machines around him, his mechanic's mind sparked to life. He scrambled toward a fallen warbot, tearing open its chest plate. Inside, wires sparked faintly. Power cells drained but not dead. Jaren worked quickly, his fingers moving faster. Then his fear. He rerouted circuits, pulled wires, forced energy into a single core. The warbot's shell glowed faintly, then shuddered. With a burst of sparks, it powered up, just enough. Enough to throw off the drone scanners with false heat. The drones swept closer, their beams crossing over Jaren's hiding spot. For a terrifying moment, one beam lingered. Jaren held his breath. His eyes locked on the baby dragon curled near its mother. If it made a sound now, if it cried again, everything would end. But the baby was silent, chewing slowly. Its glowing eyes half closed in exhaustion. The beam moved on, the drones drifting away, vanishing back into the distance. Jaren let out his breath in a shaky gasp, his body trembling. He looked back at the baby, who now pressed against its mother again, its small frame rising and falling gently. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was not the silence of death, but the fragile silence of survival. Jaren leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. He knew this was only the beginning. The commanders would notice soon. They always did. But tonight, he had heard the cry, and he had answered, and somewhere deep inside him, he knew the universe would never forgive him for this choice. But he also knew he would never forgive himself if he had done nothing. Asterisk, a dangerous decision. The night had grown colder, and every broken machine in the valley looked like a ghost in the dim moonlight. Jaren sat near the dragons, his back pressed against twisted metal, his hands still shaking from what he had done. The baby dragon slept now, curled beside its wounded mother, its breaths slow and uneven. But the silence around them was heavy, too heavy. The kind of silence that warned danger was close. Jaren knew he had crossed the line. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, not a leader, not even someone who mattered in this war. He was supposed to obey, fix, and survive. But now he had broken the first and greatest rule: never interfere with what the commanders left behind. And if they found out, his life would end, still. When he looked at the baby's small frame, glowing faintly with weak light, he could not regret his choice. He whispered to himself, his voice harsh in the cold air, "This is madness. I should walk away now, but I can't." The mother dragon stirred, her eye half opening. She was watching him again, not with hatred, not with fire, but with something else, something softer. Jaren swallowed hard. It almost felt like she was waiting for him, expecting him to continue what he had started. But how could a simple mechanic help a dying beast and her hatchling? What could he possibly do against commanders, soldiers, and rules written in blood? His hands moved without thinking. Pulling his tool bag open, he searched through scraps and broken circuits until he found a small power cell. Cracked but still alive, nearby an abandoned supply drone lay shattered, its wings bent, its engine silent. Jaren crawled toward it, opening its shell with quick, practiced hands. He began to rebuild, piece by piece, not for the soldiers, not for the army, but for the dragons. Every second was dangerous, every sound a risk. He could almost hear footsteps in the dark, even if no one was there. Still, his hands kept working, wires twisting, sparks flying, until finally the drone hummed faintly. It was alive again, weak but alive. Jaren rerouted the systems, programming it not to deliver weapons or reports, but warmth, food and water, a machine built for war, turned into a lifeline for those abandoned. He dragged the drone closer, its faint hum echoing softly in the ruins. The baby dragon stirred, sniffing at it with curiosity. Jaren watched nervously as the mother dragon's eye flickered open again. Glowing faintly, for a long moment, her gaze held him frozen, one wrong movement, and she could unleash what little strength she had left against him. But instead, she lowered her head, her body relaxing slightly, as if accepting his strange gift. The drone released a faint stream of heat, pushing back the biting cold. The baby curled closer to it, letting out a soft sound that almost sounded like contentment. Jaren exhaled slowly, his chest aching with relief. He had done it. He had bought them a little more time, but even as he looked at the small success, his stomach twisted with fear. Every minute he stayed here, the risk grew. If patrols returned, if commanders noticed missing scraps, if anyone traced the heat signature, he would be finished. And yet, when he thought of walking away, his legs would not move. Because leaving them now would mean betraying the very thing he had just saved. The night stretched on, and with it, Jaren's thoughts grew darker. He imagined what would happen when the commanders returned. He imagined the punishment, execution, torture, or worse, being fed to the very beasts he was now helping. He shuddered, gripping his tool bag tighter. He was not brave, he never had been. He was just a man who fixed machines, who survived in the shadows, but tonight, something inside him had shifted. The baby dragon let out a small cry in its sleep, a softer one now, not of pain but of hunger. Jaren felt his chest tighten again. He reached into his bag, pulling out the last of his ration packs. It wasn't much, barely enough for one man, but he tore it open anyway, placing it gently near the baby. The hatchling stirred, sniffed, and nibbled weakly. Jaren's stomach growled, his throat dry, but he ignored it. Watching the baby eat was worth more than his own hunger. For a moment, the world felt still, as if the war outside did not exist, as if it was only him, the mother, and the child, bound together by a fragile thread of survival. But that peace shattered in an instant. From the distance came the faint crunch of boots on rubble, voices low but sharp, soldiers moving through the ruins. Jaren's heart leapt into his throat, his hands freezing where they were. He pressed himself against the broken steel, listening. The voices grew closer. Laughter mixed with harsh orders. A scouting party, maybe searching for survivors, maybe just looting what was left. If they came too close, if they saw the drone, the heat, the baby, or him, it would all end. He looked at the dragons, at the baby curling near the drone, at the mother's watchful eye, and in that moment, he knew he faced a choice. He could run, slip into the shadows, save his own life, or he could stay, defend what he had just risked everything to protect. It was a dangerous decision, one that could cost him everything, but deep down, he already knew what he would choose. Jaren gritted his teeth. Gripping a broken piece of metal like a weapon, he whispered to himself, voice trembling but firm. I started this, I won't abandon now. The footsteps drew closer, the shadows of soldiers stretching across the broken valley, and in that moment, Jaren stood ready, not as a mechanic, not as a servant, but as someone who had chosen a side. Asterisk bond forged in fire. The soldiers' footsteps faded into the distance, leaving the valley quiet again. Jaren stood frozen for a long time, his heart still pounding, the broken piece of metal shaking in his hand. He had been ready to fight, ready to throw away his life in a hopeless struggle. But the danger passed, leaving behind only silence, only the sound of his own breathing. He lowered the scrap of metal. Slowly, his legs trembling beneath him, the baby dragon shifted in its sleep, pressing closer to the heat of the drone. The mother dragon's eye opened halfway, glowing faintly in the darkness. She watched him, silent, a gaze that felt less like a threat now and more like a question. Why was he still here? Why was he helping? Why had he risked everything? For them, Jaren had no answer, not even for himself. He only knew that walking away felt impossible now. The chain that began with one cry had become stronger, binding him to them. He sat down again, his back against the steel, his tool bag at his side. The cold air bit into him, but the warmth from the drone and the silent presence of the dragons held him there. The night stretched on, shadows crawling across the ruins. Jaren stayed awake, his eyes flicking between the baby and the broken machines around them. He was not a fighter, but he was a mechanic, and mechanics survive by making the broken useful. Again, so he worked, pulling scraps together, fixing circuits, shaping metal into something more. Every spark that lit under his hands felt like defiance. Every hum of power felt like hope. By dawn, the drone he had repaired was no longer just a drone. He had reprogrammed it, stripped away its combat systems, and turned it into a lifeline. It now carried warmth, small rations, and a faint shield generator meant to block scanners. The baby stirred awake, curious, sniffing at the glowing machine. It made a soft sound, almost like a chirp, and nudged it with its nose. Jaren couldn't help but laugh quietly, though his laugh was more of a tired sigh. The mother dragon's gaze softened as she watched. When Jaren moved closer, adjusting the drone's output, the baby stumbled forward, brushing against his arm. Jaren froze, his breath catching. The scales were warm, surprisingly smooth, glowing faintly under the morning light. The baby leaned against him for only a second before curling back to its mother, but that second was enough to make. Jaren realized that a bond had been forged, not of words, not of promises, but of survival and trust. Yet bonds came with risks, and Jaren knew it. If anyone discovered this, he would not just be punished, he would be hunted still. As he looked at the baby dragon's small frame, his choice felt stronger than fear. Later that day, he scavenged more, risking the edges of the valley. He found scraps of ration packs, broken water tubes, and shattered medkits. He worked tirelessly, piecing together something edible, something drinkable. The baby watched him with wide, curious eyes, its small head tilting whenever he sparked a wire or snapped a piece into place. At one point, it let out a small sound, almost like laughter. Jaren shook his head, whispering, "Don't do that, little one, you'll get us both killed." But he couldn't help smiling. That smile faded when he noticed movement on the ridge above. Another soldier, alone this time, scanning the ruins. Jaren ducked low, pulling the drone closer, shutting down its hum. The baby made a soft sound, a questioning cry. Jaren pressed a finger to his lips, begging silently for silence. The soldier's light swept dangerously close, reflecting off twisted metal. Jaren's heart thudded in his chest, every second stretching like an eternity. Then, something unexpected happened. The mother dragon shifted her wing ever so slightly, lowering it just enough to cover him. Her torn body trembled with the effort, but she shielded him completely from view. Jaren's eyes widened, his breath caught. For a moment, he forgot the danger, forgot the soldier above. All he could think was, she was protecting him. Her enemy, her captor's servant, a human. She had chosen to hide him as if he was part of her nest. The soldier moved on, never noticing the mechanic hidden beneath the dragon's wing. When the danger passed, the mother's wing dropped back. Heavily, her strength nearly gone, Jaren crawled out slowly, his chest aching with something he couldn't name. He looked at her massive face, her glowing eye half shut. For the first time he whispered not to the baby, but to her. "Why are you trusting me? Why me?" She gave no answer, only closed her eye, her chest rising weakly. But Jaren felt the answer anyway, in the silence between them, because he had chosen not to leave. Because he had chosen compassion when no one else had. The baby leaned against him again that night, its small warmth pressing into his side. Jaren let out a long, shaky breath, staring at the stars above. The bond was real now, as real as the risk. They were no longer just dragons to him. They were lives he could not abandon. And in the ruins of war, among machines built for death, something strange and powerful had begun. A bond forged not by blood or command, but by fire, pain, and choice. Asterisk the discovery. The valley was quiet again, but Jaren knew the silence would not last. Too many scraps had gone missing. Too many machines had been stripped. And sooner or later, someone would notice. The commanders always noticed. For days, Jaren worked in secret, sneaking food, patching circuits, keeping the drone alive, and feeding the baby with every scrap he could find. The mother dragon grew weaker, but she watched him constantly, her gaze following every move he made. And the baby, no longer crying as much, followed him everywhere, stumbling clumsily through the rubble, chirping softly whenever he strayed. Too far, it should have felt hopeless, but instead, it felt dangerous in a different way, because in those small moments, Jaren felt alive, like he had found a purpose beyond fixing broken machines for people who didn't care if he lived or died. But peace never survived long in war. It started with faint sounds in the night, engines humming in the distance, lights sweeping across the horizon. The commanders had returned to survey the battlefield, to gather whatever was left. Jaren crouched low, his breath stuck in his chest, watching from behind a broken hull. Alien officers marched with soldiers, scanning devices glowing red in their hands. They were searching, tracing, hunting, and their scanners beeped faintly, picking up something unusual in the valley. Jaren's heart sank. The drone. It was giving off more energy than he had realized. Its shield generator, meant to hide the dragons, had left a trace on their instruments. The soldiers barked orders, pointing toward the direction of the signal. The commanders' voices were sharp, filled with suspicion. "Something is down there, something alive," one hissed. "Finish it," another snapped coldly. And with that, a hunting squad broke away, moving directly toward the valley where Jaren and the dragons hid. Jaren scrambled back, his pulse racing. The baby chirped softly, confused, sensing his panic. The mother's eye opened, weak but burning with faint fire. Jaren knew she understood too. Death was coming again, not slow this time, but fast and merciless. His mind raced. He could leave now, slip into the shadows. Let the soldiers kill what he had tried to protect. If he was caught, they would not just kill him, they would make him an example. But when he looked at the baby dragon's glowing eyes, wide with fear, he knew leaving was no longer possible. Not after everything, not after the bond they had forged. He pressed his hands to his face, whispering through clenched teeth, "Damn it, Jaren, damn it. You can't win this." But still, he moved. Still, he searched the wreckage with desperate speed. He was not a fighter, but he was a builder. And sometimes, a builder could fight in his own way. The hunting squad descended, their armor glinting under pale light, their weapons humming. They spread out carefully, scanning, their eyes sharp, their movements precise. Jaren tore open a broken warbot, pulling wires, forcing power cells together, his fingers burning with sparks. He built not weapons in the normal sense, but traps, pressure plates hidden under rubble, circuits wired to burst in fire and smoke, machines twisted into chaos. Every clang of his tools echoed, every second cut shorter by the sound of approaching boots. The baby whimpered, and Jaren turned sharply, pressing a finger to his lips. "Quiet. Little one, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. The mother dragon shifted weakly, her great body shielding the baby with one broken wing, her glowing eye fixed on Jaren as if urging him to hurry. The first soldier appeared in the valley, his scanner glowing bright red. Jaren ducked low, pulling one last wire tight. A faint hum filled the air, his traps alive, waiting. The soldier called out, his voice sharp, "There's movement here. Something big." The others closed in, their footsteps crunching against rubble, their weapons rising. Jaren's chest tightened until he could barely breathe. This was it. His secret was uncovered, his bond discovered. He pressed his hand against the cold ground, his eyes flicking to the dragons one last time. He thought of walking away when it had all begun, of hearing the baby cry in the night, of whispering to himself, "If I walk away now, I'll regret it forever." And he realized something. That choice was still the same now, only louder, only heavier. The squad raised their weapons, red beams glowing in the dark. The mother dragon tried to rise but collapsed again. Too weak to fight, The baby cried, the sound piercing, desperate, and in that cry, Jaren heard the same chain pulling him forward, unbreakable. He clenched his teeth, his eyes blazing. "If I have to burn this valley down," he whispered, "then so be it." He pressed the trigger in his hand. The ground erupted, fire bursting from the traps he had built. The ruins roared with sudden light, machines exploding in chaos. The soldiers shouted in shock, caught in the blaze. And in that fire, Jaren stood, no longer just a mechanic, but something more. The human mechanic's fire. The valley burned, fire crawling across broken machines and shattered steel. Smoke rose into the dark sky, glowing orange in the night. The hunting squad shouted, their orders drowned beneath the crack of explosions. Jaren crouched low, his hand still gripping the trigger, his chest pounding with every blast. He had never fought a battle in his life, never held a soldier's rank, never carried a weapon meant for war. But tonight, he was fighting with fire, with circuits, with everything he could twist from the bones of dead machines. Each explosion bought seconds. Each trap turned the battlefield against its owners. The soldiers stumbled, cursing, blinded by smoke, their scanners failing. Jaren moved through the wreckage like a shadow, his mind racing faster than his fear. He pulled another wire, forcing sparks into a power cell. The ground shook as a burst of energy erupted, collapsing part of a ruined transport. One soldier screamed, trapped under falling steel, his voice cut off in an instant. The others spread out, hunting harder now. But they could not see clearly, and in the chaos, Jaren's traps came alive, hidden charges, collapsing rubble, fire that rolled like waves across the valley. The baby dragon pressed against its mother, its small body trembling as the explosions lit the sky. The mother's head lifted weakly, her glowing eyes fixed on Jaren as he fought. Like no mechanic ever should, she let out a faint growl, not of warning but of something deeper, something like respect. Jaren ducked behind a burned-out mech, his lungs burning from smoke, his hands bleeding from jagged metal. His traps were running out, his scraps nearly gone. But still he fought. He grabbed another shattered drone, ripping its fuel cell free with shaking fingers. He wired it into a broken rifle, the makeshift. Cannon sparked, unstable, deadly even to him, but he aimed it anyway, teeth clenched. The beam tore through the night, striking one soldier full in the chest, sending him crashing into the rubble. The valley echoed with the sound, fire and smoke blending into a storm. The soldiers shouted again, but their voices cracked with fear now. They had come expecting a dying dragon and silence. Instead they had found a human who fought with the fury of fire itself. Jaren staggered back, his breath ragged, his muscles screaming. But there was no time to rest. Another soldier charged through the smoke, weapon raised. Jaren ducked, sparks flashing as the beam scorched metal where he had stood. He hurled the broken rifle like a spear, striking the soldier's helmet, knocking him down long enough for rubble to collapse over him. The baby cried out at the sound, a sharp cry of fear and anger. The mother dragon shifted, her chest heaving. For the first time since the battle that had broken her, she forced herself up, her wings spread, torn and ragged, but wide enough to block the soldier's view. Her mouth opened, a weak stream of fire spilling into the smoke. It was not the fire of legends, not the fire that had once made armies flee, but it was enough to join Jaren's chaos, enough to make the soldiers hesitate. Together, man and dragon turned the valley into a storm of flame and steel. Jaren's traps ignited, the dragon's breath seared the night. The hunting squad faltered, shouting in panic. One shouted, "It's a human, he's doing this." Another cried, "Fall back, regroup." But the valley was already devouring them. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. The ground burned in patches, the wreckage smoldered, and the soldiers were gone, some dead, some fled. Jaren dropped to his knees, his chest heaving, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had nothing left to give, no strength, no traps, only the pounding of his heart. But when he looked up, he saw the mother dragon standing taller than before. Her wings still torn but lifted, her eyes burning brighter. She looked down at him, her gaze heavy, and lowered her head in a slow, deliberate bow. It was not submission, not weakness. It was recognition, recognition of the fire he had unleashed. The fire that had saved them. The baby stumbled forward, chirping loudly, pressing against Jaren's side with sudden force. He almost fell back but caught himself, his hand brushing over its warm scales. For the first time, he did not freeze, did not tremble. He let his hand rest there, feeling the pulse of life beneath. The glowing hide, he whispered hoarsely, his voice raw. "You're safe now, little one. As long as I breathe, you're safe." The mother dragon exhaled, smoke curling from her nostrils. Her gaze softening. She had seen soldiers, commanders, and armies, but she had never seen a human mechanic turn a battlefield into fire for her child. In that moment, the bond between them was no longer fragile, no longer uncertain. It was forged in blood and flame, unbreakable. Jaren looked around at the burning valley, at the ruins of machines he had turned into weapons. His hands shook as he realized what he had done. He had fought the commander's soldiers. He had killed them. There was no going back now, no hiding, no pretending. The moment word spread, he would be hunted across every world. And yet, as the baby pressed against him and the mother dragon bowed her head once more, he felt no regret. He had made his choice. He had unleashed his fire, and he knew the galaxy would never forget it. A new alliance. The fire in the valley smoldered through the night. Ash floated in the air, glowing faintly under the pale light of distant stars. Jaren stood among the ruins, his clothes torn, his hands black with soot and blood. His traps were spent, his tools broken, and yet he was still alive. Beside him, the baby dragon rested against his side, warm, steady, safe. And towering above them, the mother dragon stood taller than she had since her fall. Her wings broken, but lifted, her gaze fierce again. For the first time, Jaren felt the valley was not silent. It was alive with something new, something bigger than fear. The bond they had forged in fire had turned into something unshakable, and yet, in the distance, horns sounded, alien war signals echoing through the night. The commanders had learned of the squad's defeat. They would come with more. Not 10 soldiers, not 20, but entire battalions. Jaren knew the valley would not stay theirs for long. He staggered to his feet, his body aching, and looked at the mother dragon. Her eyes locked with his, glowing with a strength that should not have been possible after so much pain. She lowered her head once more, slowly, deliberately, a gesture of trust, of choice, not an animal bowing to a human, but an equal offering her respect. Jaren's chest tightened, his throat dry. He whispered softly, his voice trembling, "We can't stay here. If we stay, we all die." The baby chirped, tilting its head, as if agreeing. Jaren wiped the sweat from his brow and looked around the burning wreckage. He was only a mechanic. He had no army, no allies, no way to fight battalions. But what he did have now was something stronger, the loyalty of a dragon and her child that alone could shake the galaxy if he dared to let it. The ground shook suddenly. Distant engines roaring, lights flashing on the horizon. The commanders were coming faster than he had expected. Their ships cast long shadows across the battlefield, their beams scanning every inch of ruined steel. Jaren's heart pounded. He knew running alone meant death. He knew staying meant death. But maybe, just maybe, escaping together could mean something else, something greater. He scrambled to the broken remains of a transport carrier, his hands moving quickly despite the pain. Circuits sparked, wires hissed, and metal groaned under his touch. Piece by piece, he forced the engine back to life. Not perfect, not safe, but alive behind him. The mother dragon shifted, lowering herself slowly. Her body trembled with weakness, but her wings stretched wide enough to shield him from scanning beams. She was protecting him as he worked. The very creature the commanders had abandoned, now guarding the human who broke their rules. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared. Weakly, Jaren almost laughed. Exhaustion turning into relief, he turned back, pointing to the mother and baby. "Come on, we don't have much time," he whispered harshly. The baby bounded forward clumsily, climbing onto the wreck with surprising eagerness. The mother followed, her steps heavy, her body nearly collapsing, but she climbed, her eyes never leaving the horizon where enemy ships drew closer. The transport lifted off the ground, engines screaming in protest. Beams of light swept over the valley, catching glimpses of fire and smoke. Shouts echoed from above as soldiers spotted the rising wreck. Weapons fired, streaks of energy tearing through the sky, but the mother dragon's wings spread wide, deflecting the blasts with her scales, her body shielding the fragile craft. The baby roared for the first time, a tiny, high-pitched roar, but fierce in its own way. And Jaren felt his heart surge. The transport broke free from the valley floor, climbing higher, fire blazing beneath it. Explosions followed, but the dragon's fire met them, streams of flame painting the sky. Together, human and dragon fought their way out. Every blast defied, every strike endured, and when at last the valley fell behind, nothing but smoke and silence remained inside the transport. Jaren collapsed against the controls, his chest heaving. The baby curled into his lap, warm and alive. The mother pressed her head against the edge of the transport, her glowing eyes soft but unyielding. Jaren looked at them both, his lips trembling. He whispered, "I don't know where we're going, but we'll find a place they can't touch us." Far away, the alien commanders roared in anger. They called him traitor, enemy, dangerous. But among the soldiers, whispers already spread. Whispers of a human mechanic who stood against the commanders. A human who fought beside a dragon. A human who might have just begun a fire that no army could put out. Jaren stared out at the stars ahead, his eyes heavy but burning with determination. He had broken the rules, he had chosen compassion, and now he carried something the galaxy feared, a new alliance, born in fire, forged in trust, bound by survival, the kind of alliance that could change everything. And as the transport vanished into the endless dark, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would come of the bond between a human and a dragon.